guess what? Maybe like March or April of
Well,
2012.
I didn't realize it'd been that long anyway.
I think Dennis was one of the first guests.
Dennis, you want to tell everybody what American Stonehenge is, just so they have an idea?
Yeah, American Stonehenge is located in Salem, New Hampshire, about 40 miles north of Boston, and we believe it's one of the oldest man-made stone ruins in, if not just North America, but all of the Western Hemisphere, possibly. We've dated it back to about 4,000 years using different techniques of dating. And it's a megalithic type site. It looks a lot like some of the sites you'd see throughout Europe. And there's about 50,000 megalithic sites besides Stonehenge. And it looks a lot like some of these other sites. We think it was a site of worship. It definitely has astronomical alignments of the sun, moon, and stars. It sits on a very large hill. And we don't think people lived up there. We think it was just used for special occasions. And it consists of stone structures, underground tunnels, drains. It has a very large slab that's called the sacrificial table, and it weighs about 9,000 pounds. And it has inscriptions that have been found on the site also. And it is quite similar to what you'd see in Western Europe, basically. These megalithic sites, they go from the Neolithic right into the Bronze Age. And they're actually scattered throughout the world in about 5 continents besides Europe and North America.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a nice overview. You know, a lot of the visual descriptions can be seen on Scott Walter's America Unearthed. You want to tell us about his visit to your site, making a 45-minute TV show devoted to your property.
Yes, Scott was there. Let's see, in the year 2012, they were up for about 6 days of shooting from early morning to late at night, and it was an exciting time to be working with Scott and the crew on the shoot. And Scott had been at our site a couple times before that over the years because he's written many books. And so I had met him before that, but we're so happy to have him choose our site as one of the 13 episodes of the original first season. And they did shoot a lot of different scenes all around our site, and particularly the astronomical work on the site too, with the solstices, equinoxes, and an alignment that my son Kelsey had found just prior to Scott's visit with the TV crew that came up. He had found it just about a month or so before that, actually.
Well, I got to admit, I haven't seen Scott's show. I've only been able to catch one episode of the show so far. I'm going to check it out, though.
It's on both History 2 and then occasionally on History. We were just on last week on the History channel on it, and they move it back and forth. And this Friday will be on at 8 o'clock on H2 and at midnight, which is really nice. I think they've shown it probably about 25 times since its first airing a year ago on the 25th of this month, actually.
I didn't know it was that long ago. Scott announced his upcoming show on our show, didn't he, Mark? Are you there, Mark?
You were
on mute, weren't you?
Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, Scott, did announce his show, and here we have, Scott's probably going to be on in March, and Dennis is here. Dennis has been on. Rick Osman, who's been a
Rick's pretty awesome too.
Dennis was on Rick's TV show about a year ago also. So word's getting out about how unique the site is. And
are you planning any kind of books?
Me?
No, Dennis.
Oh.
I know you're writing articles.
Actually, I started putting together a book about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was doing it on an audio cassette, and then we were putting it on the computer. Eventually, I'm going to retire from the airline in about 2 years, I believe. I'll be 62 years old, and I think at that time I'll probably get the book together. In the meantime, some of the books that have been written about us, like the one with David Galsworth, is just being updated. And my dad co-wrote that with him about 10 or 11 years ago, I guess. And that book's being updated, and I'm helping Dave a little bit with that since my dad passed away a couple of years ago. And then I would like to put a book out. My wife's been on my back to do that for a couple of years. And when that comes out, we'll have like the latest information of the site, and all the different things that we've been talking about. So I think that'll be kind of exciting to get the book out and everything. But I'm going to wait till I retire to finish it, I think, which is not long away.
All right, I want to make sure everybody knows where they can find you. Is it StonehengeUSA.com?
Oh, that's correct, yes. Yep, and they feel to email us. Our email address is on that, and we're open every day of the year except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So somebody's always up there, and we do snowshoeing in the winter, so we keep it open year-round, and people can see the site that way.
Oh, I'd love to go myself. I'm interested in all them kind of ancient sites, and I don't hardly get to go see any of them.
Right. Scott
shows in the middle of a bunch of them.
Yeah, I know. And Scott shows so because it shows a lot of these sites that people have never heard of. And even though we've been open since 1958 to the public, a lot of people, of course, haven't heard of us. And Scott shows helped to make people aware of our site. And there's so many. He could probably do a couple hundred shows, Back in the 70s, Leonard Nimoy with In Search of did 144 shows, and a lot of them we were on his second show, actually.
Yeah, I remember seeing that show.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, yeah. And every now and then they repeat that, although I haven't seen it for a couple of years, but there's so many different things you can do.
It can be found on YouTube.
Yes, exactly, right, exactly. And it's a little bit older show, but it did talk about the things we're talking about today and all these mysteries and everything, and we do have more information than we had back then, but the site is still kind of a mystery as to what the site is and who built it and what happened to the people that did build the site.
Now, Scott Waller's helped you date the site with pottery and stuff, right?
Well, he looks at the carvings, and he was looking at one of the stones called the Bale Stone, and Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard University identified it as Iberian Punic back in 1975. About 11 years after it was actually discovered on the site. So for 11 years it sat inside a museum as unknown script. And Dr. Barry Fell came along and identified it as Iberian Punic. And then Scott examined it, and he did kind of a preliminary examination of it. He believes that the markings are quite old. They look aged. The actual grooves carved into it are quite old. I think there's more work to be done on this stone and some of the other carvings that have been found on the site. But Scott has been a big help, I think, in identifying, looking at it geologically, whether the markings look fresh or they look like they've been there for quite a while, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, they use patina, don't they? On them.
Right. Yeah. He uses the microscopes and he looks at how the micas, like biotite and pyrite and stuff like that, tend to weather and they start to deteriorate. And if somebody made a fresh scratch in the rock or just did it a few years ago or even 50 or 100 years ago, he could tell that versus something that was in there for thousands of years, I guess. Not precisely a certain date, but he can tell this was done like a few years ago kind of thing.
Well, Dennis, could you tell us about that, Kelsey's discovery about the line that goes from America's Stonehenge to Stonehenge in England and beyond? I thought that was really fascinating, watching it on the show.
Yeah, that was, we found that about, almost 2 years ago. It was in the spring of 2012. And he had been doing some Google Earth research, and he was looking at the alignments, and he was going out on the astronomical alignments over the hills of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine also, where these alignments go, and up to Vermont to see if there's anything on these alignments, other sites. And there are some sites in New England that are on these on these alignments. Could be coincidence, but when he went overseas on the summer solstice sunrise, he went about 3,200 miles and went right across England, across Ireland into England, and it went right over Stonehenge. It's like, wow, and then as he did a little bit more, he magnified, the scale of it and everything, and you could see where this line went. It went right through the horseshoe shape, right through the big trilithon of Stonehenge, right through the center of it. And that was like, holy mackerel, we had no idea that the summer solstice sunrise was aligned with the Stonehenge in England, the sun, that same direct line. And that was, it's sort of like, we were all like, holy cow, that's pretty interesting.
Does it happen to be a ley line?
Well, that's what some people believe, the sacred geometry of the earth, the PowerPoints, the ley line. And I was familiar with Alfred Watkins way back in the 70s, reading about what he came up with. These sites seem to be in line with one another. And he was going 3,200 miles across the ocean, and this went right through the center of Stonehenge. And it's a coincidence. It was quite a coincidence. It really was like, holy mackerel. So he had to do the line a few times just to make sure the accuracy of it, and he had other people do it too, see what they came up with. And it goes right through the center of it. And then it continues past that and ends up going into Lebanon, into Lebanon where the Phoenicians were, But that was quite the exciting thing we found. And Scott had already scheduled us, I think, at that time to come up. So this is something that, actually David Brody was involved with this. He was up there on a tour that right after this was done. I showed it to Dave, and Dave's a good friend of Scott Walters. And I think he got on the phone immediately and let Scott know what was going on with this alignment, And then they began looking into it and decided to do one of the shows on us. They were thinking about it anyway, but this is the thing that really quenched it from this alignment, So my son's done some other alignments too. There's some other interesting alignments besides that particular one, but that was like the most exciting one, I think.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, Scott, Dennis, instead of looking at the alignments, going east of America's Stonehenge, you have some alignments to the west, like the Turtle Mound. Could you explain that and like some of the other sites in the area, please?
Yeah, I mean, even in the 1970s, people were kind of wondering, we had a couple of researchers looking at more nearby sites to see if they aligned with ours. And there is one that goes right on we have a North Stone alignment that's aligned with Polaris, the pole star today. And that alignment goes right through the center of our site, right through the astronomical viewing platform, and it goes into what we call the south pointing wall. That north-south axis actually, if you continue on the south line, it will actually go through a really neat structure in Massachusetts in a town called Andover, and it's a turtle mound. And if you look down at it from above, it looks like a gigantic turtle made out of rocks, very large stones, and it has some earth on it, of course. And that was featured in a book called Weird New England. There's really beautiful photographs of it. Nobody knows who built it or when it was built and what it was for, but it looks like one of those kind of an effigy or animal mounds. It's really, really neat. That alignment goes right through the center of that. If you continue on that line, it comes out pretty. He's got to do more. My son's got to do more work on this portion of it, though. The line continues, and it goes down into South America, and it goes right by Machu Picchu. What we got to find out is if it actually goes right through the center of Machu Picchu. Again, part of that ley line, that idea, and that was kind of a neat thing too. To the southwest, the winter solstice goes right by Teotihuacan in Mexico, and these are all World Heritage sites: Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Teotihuacan in Mexico City, which I've been to that too. The Moon Pyramid and the Sun Pyramid. The alignment goes right by there too. What we need to do is a little bit more work on that one. He didn't have as much. He's been in college, and working full time, and he needs to get back and look at that. And other people can do that too.
Do you think all these sites might be aligned with sacred geometry?
That's what some people believe. Yeah, we're in a couple of different books. I'm trying to think of an author about 2 years ago. I got the book in my library over at the museum. I don't have it right with me now. And he has us in his book. He has a whole chapter on us. And that could, he might have, I don't know if it was done before my son's work, actually. And he put us in there. He said, we're one of the power points on the earth, part of that sacred geometry. And he has all these diagrams and maps and everything, how we fit into the whole thing. It was kind of interesting. And that came out, I think, just before my son did his research.
Dennis, does that line you're talking about go through that site in Connecticut called Gunjewamp?
Oh, the Gunjewamp site, yeah. I'm not sure if that's on one of the alignments, but that is also a really interesting site, the Gunjewamp site. And the early reference we have is something written in 1654. A guy named John Pynchon wrote to Governor Winthrop, and what he was asking was who built this thing. And now it's pretty early, right? About a little over 30 years after Plymouth Plantation was settled. And he's already wondering at that time who had built these stone constructions. And today, a lot of people think these were all built by our forefathers, a lot of these sites. That's kind of the easy answer, that America's Stonehenge and all these other strange stone sites across North America are all relatively recent, just built by our forefathers for, farms, root cellars, that kind of thing. But somebody at that time, over 300 years ago, was wondering who built it, just like we are today.
There were some Cairo symbols found at Gunjewamp, and that's really not too far from you.
That's correct. Yeah, it's probably less than a 2-hour drive. It's in Groton, Connecticut, near the Navy base. It's on land next to the Navy base. It's about a 200-acre piece of land. And there's some talk of maybe the state or somebody else taking it over to preserve Gunjewamp. And there was a society called the Gunjewamp Society. We had about 700 members. And there are some carvings there, and they seem to be Cairo or Christian markings. And the datings from, I think, some of the pottery, and I think, I'm trying to think of the carbon datings down there. But the date of the structures, I think, is more around the time of about the 6th century A.D. It's not as old as our site. It's possible a couple of chambers could be a little bit older, but they think for the most part it was sometime around 600 A.D. time period. But there is one chamber that looks like our watch house. The watch house at our site is located remote. It's kind of a satellite structure. It's located a couple hundred feet from the main site where most of the structures are. It is our particular chamber is astronomically aligned. If you go from that astronomical viewing platform over the watch house on a sunrise, on a sunrise, it's the February 1st alignment. It's one of the ancient Celtic holidays. But that structure looks so much like it. It's got a large glacial boulder, and the structure was built to the left side. As you're looking into the structure, there's a big boulder on the right, and the structure is built over the boulder, and it has like a flat stone roof that they put on the boulder and on a wall they built adjacent to it. It looks just like one of the structures at Gunjewamp, and there are about 50 of those type of structures in New England, actually, of that same kind of design. So that could be a little bit older chamber, possibly,
Now, do you think this place, American Stonehenge, is also called Mystery Hill? Yeah, it's one of the common names that people call it.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think there was actual sacrifices going on here?
That's a great question. We don't know the culture. If we knew exactly the culture, we have some ideas, of who these people could be from inscriptions and because of the type of construction, the style of construction in the time period. The table is very large. It's about 9 feet approximately by about 6 feet. It has a big rectangular groove carved on it, which is about 6 feet by 4 feet. And this groove has a little runnel, and it runs off to the front of the stone in front of it, there's actually a cutout in the bedrock where a vase could sit, like a vase that, a bowl or something like that could collect the fluid or blood. And there's about 4 others in New England And one of the researchers actually has been going out looking at, actually has been written a book on this, on these stones. And he's doing more research. And he lives in Florida. He's up this way quite a bit. And he was the co-author with my dad on the latest book. And he's done a lot of research on these stones to identify them and separate them from lye stones, which is a stone used to make soap. Some of the people have said our stone's a big lye stone for soap making, like the Ivy Soap Factory. Some people think it was a cider press, for making apple cider or apple jack, something like that. And so he's gone out and researched these very closely to see the differences between our stone and something that was used for making soap or making apple cider. And there's quite a bit of, there's quite a difference between them. But our stone looks a lot like a picture I saw in Portugal, one shaped like a maple leaf. It was a very large slab. It had a groove carved on it. And the legends of the stone are that it was used for human sacrifice or some sort of animal sacrifice. And there are chambers over in that area near the Douro River in Portugal that look a lot like our structures, and they're on the same latitude, as a matter of fact.
The size of it, to me, sounds like it might have been for some sort of animal sacrifice. It's
very large, yeah, and it could have been. And connected to that is the oracle chamber, which is one of the largest chambers on the site, and there's a tube that goes horizontally through the wall, and that's what we call the oracle tube or speaking tube. And the table itself is set up on 4 legs. The first researcher that came in the 1930s, they took photographs of it and was pretty much buried up with debris all the way up to the top of the rock. It looked like it was just laying on the ground. And as they began cleaning and digging, they found the 4 legs. They found that cutout where like a base could sit. And they also found, eventually they found the speaking tube. It had 2 plugs of stone, one on both sides, inside the oracle chamber, and one underneath the table where that tube comes out. At first, they didn't even know there was a hole there, and it was like concealed by somebody who was closing the site down or something. They actually concealed the tube. Somebody wiggled a rock. One of the researchers said, "Hey, look at this. There's a hole through here." They went to the other side, pulled the plug. Unfortunately, lost both stone plugs. They don't have them anymore. But it looked like somebody was trying to hide that. And when I went to Greece with my wife when we got married, we saw the Oracle of Delphi. It was kind of a similar idea, where somebody would speak and the voice would come out, and people would hear this voice singing it with a spirit or a god, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. And years later, we visited Malta, and they had the same kind of thing in Malta. And I talked to the guide on the tour over there, and he said these are speaking tubes or oracle tubes, and people would talk. People heard the voice coming out. They thought it was a spirit talking to them or a god or something like that. Same kind of idea.
Them high priests were pretty smart guys, weren't they?
They were, and they had control of the people that way. I think that, and kept people in line, I guess. Like a Wizard of Oz kind of thing.
Yeah, Dennis, you just brought up Portugal, the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, Malta. You've been to all these places, and you're seeing some of the similar structures right there on your property. We've had Frank Joseph on in the last 2 times in the last couple months. You're saying the same thing he's saying with all these old world people coming over to the new world. It's just amazing. All this information is right there in front of us, and we aren't recognizing it.
It's hidden from us.
Yeah, it's in your face, but it's hiding, kind of. It looks like Christopher Columbus and the Vikings were the first ones to come across, and we know Native Americans have been here for thousands and thousands of years. We actually have a fire pit we found on the site back in the 1990s. And it was up top of the hill near the North Stone. It didn't really date the site of the North Stone or any of the walls, but the dating was 7,500 years old. So we know somebody was on top of the hill at that time period building a campfire. And we don't know who it was, but it was called the Middle Archaic time period. And it was kind of an exciting time for us. It shows that people have been on this hill for a long, long time. It's like a layering of cultures up there, people using that hill over and over again. Into the west side of our hill, we have the beautiful Indian cliffs. That's what we call Native American or Indian cliffs. that's a name that's kind of stuck, but we found pottery that dates around 2,500 years into the cliff. On top of the cliff, there's a path, and that path is part of the Indian Trail Network of New England. It's actually on the maps, and it's called the Pawtucket Trail. And so Native Americans are walking across the western part of our hill, about 1,000 feet from the main site, but still on top of the hill, walking, use that for one of the roadways, actually.
About 2,000 years ago, you said?
Yeah, the pottery dates around 2,500 to 2,000 years old. It's middle woodland period pottery. And down near our parking lot on the opposite side of the hill, on the side of the hill sheltered from the northwesterly winds, we found a wigwam site back around 1995, and it was about 30 feet in diameter. We think that was a winter camp. So that's just another time period. It was another group of people living on the hill, and part of that layering of cultures. But the original builders were there, we think, around 4,000 years ago.
Could you tell the listeners how they could find your place and
sure.
What they could expect to see on the property, what they're allowed to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You mean as far as just finding a place, when you're driving,
finding
or
the place, and
mm-hmm.
I mean, do you get to go into this cave you're talking about, man-made cave?
Oh, yeah, great question. Yeah, I know a lot of the sites you visit, like at Stonehenge, you're going to stay outside the growth area.
Yeah, they don't allow anybody in Stonehenge.
Yeah, special permission, to do that. And even we went to Greece on a honeymoon, and Athens, went up on the Parthenon and all that. You can't, up there, you can't even bring a camera up there. You can walk around parts of it.
I've been there.
Oh, you've been there? Yeah,
Yes.
I had a video camera. But we, on the other hand, if you come to our site, you're welcome to take pictures, video, whatever you want. You can walk through most of the chambers. We ask that you don't go on top of the roofs. We're trying to protect the persons and the structures themselves from wear and tear, but you can walk into the Oracle Chamber. And Scott has Scott Walters videotaped that. Some really nice shots of that with him in there talking about it, So on that TV show, you'll see that. The tables, he goes all over the table and about the weathering on the table. He explains that and how it looks like it's been aged, for many, many, many centuries. It's nothing that was done, 100 or 200 years ago. But yeah, you can walk through the site, and there's a map that we give you. It's a 4-page map. Everything's numbered. But before you go up on the site, there's actually a 10-minute video presentation inside of a theater. And we have a 30-minute video you can buy, but this was done back in the 1990s. It's a very nice, nice introductory film, actually. And it's about 10 minutes long. And then you begin your tour. And we have 110 acres up there. You cover about 20 to 25 of the acres to cover the whole site in the astronomical alignments. Probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours you can spend up there. Some people spend all day up there, of course, if you go at your own leisure. And usually somebody on hand to answer questions, too. We try to have somebody around, to talk to people, too, if we can. If not up on the site, but down in the building sometimes also, when it's slow.
Dennis, when's the next, it would be cross-quarter day. When would the next one be where people could, be there to see the alignment with it would be sunrise? Is that right?
Yeah, Mark. There's we have the cross quarter days, and this will be February 1st. And I'm trying to look at the calendar. It looks like it might be is it a Friday or Saturday? I think it is. I'm looking at quite a distance.
So the next one's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we do open for the sunrise, and on summer we open both sunrise and sunset, and we have that on our website. And sometimes we'll have a celebration up there. They just had the one for the winter solstice a few weeks ago on the 21st, I think it was, or the 20th. I was flying those days, so I missed it, unfortunately. But it was on a weekend, and they had a nice turnout there, even though the weather was a little bit iffy, I think. I think some people saw the sunset at the very end. The clouds parted, We have all the cross-quarter days, which would be May 1st, August 1st, February 1st, and November 1st. And some of these are holidays that we celebrate today. November 1st is, All Saints Day, the day after Halloween. That's one of the important ones too. On the ancient calendar, that was the beginning of winter. midwinter solstice would be December 20th or 21st, and then the end of winter would be February 1st, which is Candlemas on some calendars. The Catholics, my wife's Catholic, she's heard of Candlemas before, or Groundhog Day is kind of the day after that. And then it goes to the, March, the spring equinox, and then it goes to May Day, which is one of those big stones that we're thinking of possibly excavating and then maybe repositioning sometime. It's over 10 feet tall. It's a very visual stone if it was stood up. And that would be the beginning of the summer period. And then June 21st would be the midsummer solstice. And then it goes to August 1st, which is the end of summer, beginning of the fall season. But we have all those alignments for the sun. And then we have the lunar alignments. So the moon goes through an 18-and-a-half-year cycle. And we have the lunar major north and south, which was like 1969 would have been a major. I remember that year specifically. We went to the moon. That was a major. 9 years later was a minors, where the moon is very close to the equator, rising and setting. And then we have both the moon rises and moon sets. And then 9 years later it goes back to the majors. So it's an 18-and-a-half-year cycle. And Carnac in France actually is another place that actually has those alignments to mark that.
Well, you got quite a bit going on there.
yeah, we have the moon, we have the sun, and then we have some, what we did in the 1960s is after that CBS special about, Stonehenge, I was after a book called Stonehenge Decoded, came out in 1963. The CBS special came out 2 years later, and we saw that on TV, and we're like, wow, we know there's stones out there away from the main site. In fact, the first researcher in the 30s knew about them, but didn't know what they were. These stones standing out there, these great big arrowhead-shaped stones. He was so busy with the main site, he didn't have time to go out there and really research them. So it wasn't until the 1960s, and that show really prompted that. And we said, gee, we'll have to start going out there, cutting trees so we can actually watch the sun or moon or whatever rise or set. And that's when the project began in the 60s. We hired a professional survey team to survey all these walls and all these stones. That was fed into a computer in 1977 at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And what we found out, we only had the sun and moon, but we had what looked like 24 star alignments up there that we weren't even aware of. We just had all the survey data. They threw it through the computer and said, you got also some star alignments going on here, about 24 of them. So we're still working on the star alignment stuff, that we haven't got that all.
Mark's got a question he wants to get in there before you get too far off the subject there.
Dennis, just a second ago you were talking about, restoring one of the stones that fell over. What do you think about this idea of when stones, like at Stonehenge that fall over, do you prefer them to just be on the ground, or would you like to restore the site to its original splendor and let everyone see what it really looked like? What's the philosophy behind the way you're going to approach that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a difficult question to answer too. How much do we want to disturb the site? Because Goodwin did some of that back in the 1930s, and he caught a little bit of flack for doing that because you altered the site a little bit. And when you do that, you change things. You're not sure if you change it back to the way it really was. But also when you're doing it, first off, we'd have to probably do a couple archaeological digs, and those by themselves are kind of destructive in a way, because once you do a dig, that hole's not, virgin anymore. It's been touched, the artifacts have been taken out. And then later generations of archaeologists have much better techniques as time goes on, and now they can't, get in there and test it, with better equipment, better techniques and all of that. But that's a really good question. Do we want to move some of these stones or just leave them the way they are? I had a discussion with Scott Walters about that and a couple of projects I had in mind, but I said, I just don't know if we want to go through and move some of these things. It would be very spectacular, for instance, to stand up that Mayday stone. It's such a large stone. We would excavate to see if there was a socket there. We might find some tools in that dig. We might find some charcoal or something to help carbon date to see when, when maybe the stone was standing there. We did that on the North Stone, actually. We found a fire pit in front of it, and the fire pit was a later feature. The stone was an earlier feature. We could tell because the fire pit was undisturbed and the layers of soil around it, the strata was undisturbed. That dated to 650 AD. So we know that the fire pit was made in 650 AD, but the stone behind it was there before that, and it could have been there 3,000 or 4,000 years. But we had actually a way of telling that North Stone was there way before, Columbus even came over, or the Vikings. It goes way back. So it was that was done around 1988 to 1991. That was exciting. We were able to date one of our upside stones. So the Belton stone, maybe we would find out more to support those dates. But then again, we're kind of changing and moving things around, and some people don't think it should be disturbed at all. But they've done that at Stonehenge, they've done that at Newgrange, and a lot of these ancient sites, even some of the pyramids, they've done some restoration work, and it doesn't make everybody happy, And maybe for research, sometimes it's better just to leave something alone. But we may do one of the stones though, the Equinox Sunrise or the May Day. We may do that sometime.
Dennis, do you think it's worth taking the chance of disturbing the site, but maybe you'll find some priceless artifact that confirms an exact date? Is it worth taking the chance?
Like pick up that stone and find a Viking under it?
Right, yeah, that would be exactly. Yeah, that would certainly get a lot of attention. That would be a lot of information coming out of that particular digger. But they do use ground penetration radar, and there was a company right down the street in Salem, our neighbors actually, that makes that equipment. They moved downtown Salem now. They're not in the same facility, but they're bringing people up and using that equipment. They found a couple of fire pits. It's like X-ray vision, and they were doing this in the 1990s. But I think that'd be the way to go. If you could use equipment's very, very expensive. Unfortunately, they were just coming up there and they were demonstrating it to customers from all over the world, and we really benefited. We had our archaeologists working with them and everything. Well, only 1% of the hill has been dug since 1936, so 99% of the hilltop hasn't been dug. But we have run radar over the hill, and we've done shovel test pits, and that was about a 10-year study. Shovel test pits about a 50-centimeter diameter hole, and they go down with a shovel, actually, to the hit bedrock or glacial soil, what they call pre-occupational level. And that's how we found that Wigwam site. That's how we found that 7,500-year-old carbon dating. They dug down. If they get something, then they'll lay up a good work of string. They'll stop immediately, But the shovel test pits for archaeological and geological research. And the lady that did it, she was the president of the Hampshire Archaeological Society at the time. Her husband was a geologist at Tufts University, so we had both. She had a lot of and she could have him help us too. And what they found was by the shovel test pits, we ran about 100 of them. It took about 8 years. The hilltop was 75% bare back then, and over the years, the soils very slowly built up, and we have a forest up there today. So it was opposite Stonehenge in England, where today it's pretty clear. Back 5,000 years ago, they had a forest. Today, it's clear. Our place has a forest, but back then it was mostly clear, just the opposite. So you had a pretty open hill back then. But when you start digging holes up there, it does cause. It's good. You can find things out, but you're also, but they call it destructive too at the same time.
Well, archaeology is destructive on the site a lot of times. Can't help
it. It does, yeah.
Dennis, I've heard of a new procedure about using balloons to erect the stones. Have you heard of that procedure? Yeah. One of our researchers has been around since the 1970s. He's worked over in Scotland and England on some megalithic and medieval castles. He's a master mason, actually, and he's a doctor of theology and a doctor of historical anthropology. He worked on our side. He's the one that found out the big slabs up there were shaped using hammerstones. They quarried the stones. They used Stone Age technology to shape these stones. It was percussion flake and stone against stone.
But we were talking to him last year about that chamber in ruins where the stone that Scott has on his show, the Dale stone. And there's one other stone that was found in there that Dr. Fell identified as Libyan writing, but it was broken and it was not enough inscription to actually be translated. But it was Libyan, I guess. And that particular structure has that big, about a 9-ton stone that fell into it. And both Dave and his assistant were talking about these, I think they're more like an airbag. You know, it's kind of like a huge airbag, and or like a balloon, I suppose, and you pump air into it, and actually can lift up these stones. And I haven't seen it. They're describing how it's, I guess it's gentle on the stones. You're not putting chains and hoists, and the chains dig into the stone and scratch it and can break the stone. These big airbags can get under there and actually lift these multi-ton stones out of there. And that's a project that we're kind of thinking of right now, because that chamber is where those 2 inscriptions came from. And we'd like to clean it out, see if there's any other, any kind of artifacts in there, including inscriptions. And every structure up there so far we found has underground drains that keep the structures dry. Some of these drains run 75 feet. They're like storm drains. That chamber, we just don't know if it has it. But it has 2 windows. They're stone windows. And it has an entrance. And it has a beautiful lintel stone that's sitting on the earth that's nobody's ever dug below it. So that may be a good place to look for artifacts.
Now these the writing that you found, has it been interpreted?
Yeah, Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard. He died almost 20 years ago. He's from New Zealand. He went to school in England. I think the university, I'm trying to think if it was Cambridge or Oxford. He taught at Harvard University for over 2 decades. And he also started a group called the Epigraphic Society, which is still around. In fact, there's a Western Epigraphic Society, and I think there's a couple other branches of that. They study ancient scripts, not only in North America, but all over the world. And he looked at the markings from North America to South America. He found Phoenician, Libyan, Celtic, early Hebrew, Latin. I'm trying to think of some other script he found. But the Celtic Ogham, for instance, he's found that all the way out to the Milk River in Alberta, Canada. And Phoenician all the way from Little Manana Island up in Maine all the way down to Brazil. And our site has the different markings, Celtic Ogham. There's a sun symbol. It's actually just a symbol. It's like a tic-tac-toe scratches across the rock. That was found in 1975 when Barry Fell had visited the site several times. One time I was up there, and one of us was in what we call the paddy area. It's part of the site, and we were looking at a rock, and it seemed to have markings. We showed it to him. He looked at it, and it was pretty like, oh wow, this, it was something, And so he took it back to his house in Arlington, Mass. He studied it, and it was a Celtic sun symbol. And it was right in one of the walls, just laying right there. But the other inscriptions up there are the Phoenician and Libyan, and he identified one saying that big chamber was a sun temple dedicated to Baal by the Canaanites. And the Libyan, again, was broken, so that wasn't, he wasn't able to do that. And then we have a carving of an arrow in the oracle chamber and a deer carving. And then to the west of the site, it's a carving called the G stone. And it's supposed to be it looks like a G, kind of like a G, but he calls it the G stone. It's I believe, a Libyan symbol for God, and that's out near the cliff area, about 1,000 feet from the main site. That one there, we'll have to look a little bit closer. It's really kind of neat looking, but it's one of those things: is it natural or is it man-made? Because nature sometimes plays tricks on you. The other ones are definitely man-made markings, but the other one out there, that one has been argued back and forth what it is.
Mark, you want to go where?
Yes.
You put in the chat. I want to go there. I'm not sure what you. It's not like New Hampshire is real close to me, but I'm determined to get there sooner or later. I want to go visit the site. I do too.
We both come up together and give you a grand tour of the site, and bring your families with you.
I don't even go to the store, let alone go out of state.
Well, you watch Scott's show, you'll get a good idea of it. And
yeah, I'm gonna check out his show just so I can.
Yeah. There are some really.
I've looked at your website quite a bit in the past.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Like I said, I'd love to go. I thought you wanted to go where that question was you posted above it.
Oh, yeah.
Dennis, since you're saying that there's been Phoenician writing there, the Irish Cairo symbols, and there's just been waves of visitors coming to northeastern United States for thousands of years, basically, is what you're saying.
In the different times, it appears, the Cairo figures would have been later in time, and then the Phoenician writing. Very felt it's a Phoenician writing. The Phoenicians were around about they become identified as Phoenicians around 1500 BC because they came from the Canaanites or Amorites or whatever, but they actually go back. I mean, they had parents and grandparents, it wasn't just all of a sudden they appeared on Earth like that, but the Phoenicians have been around. Some people suggest even earlier. I've seen maybe 3000 BC. But yeah, even on our site, we have different time periods at 7,500-year-old date to 4,000-year-old date. We have we have some carbon datings that 600 AD time period, and then the wigwam site around 2,000 years. So yeah, and people coming to New England. I mean, they have been coming over actually to North America at various times. By different waves of people coming across the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. And they're looking at animals now. They're looking at diseases. They're looking at DNA evidence. And the head of the Smithsonian Department of Anthropology has been to some of a group called NERA, New England Antiquities Research Association. And he's been to a couple of the meetings. And back in the 60s and 70s, you wouldn't have that happening. It was considered a kind of a far-out group, looking at these strange stone structures, a bunch of crazy people out there in the woods looking at these things, and now you have mainstream archaeologists to some degree. I mean, there's still some skepticism as to what these sites are, and who built them and how old they are. But now they're thinking that people crossed the Mid-Atlantic and Arctic Atlantic 19,000 years ago coming to America. And so that's really interesting. Our site's about 4,000, so it's much later than that time period, but they're thinking they came over on boats. There's DNA evidence, there's linguistic evidence, there's the stone tools that seem to match European tools, not tools from Siberia as we once thought. The Clovis and the Folsom point technology seems to have come across the Atlantic Ocean rather than across Alaska from Russia, actually. So that's kind of an interesting development in the last 15 years or so.
Is there any evidence of any of them old copper mines in that area?
In this area here, let's see. Some silver mines have been found in New Hampshire. I think there's a little bit of copper. Mostly the real big copper, as you probably know, is the ones out in Belle Isle and Lake Superior, where they have 500 million pounds of it missing. And I think Scott's show, one of the shows, talks all about that. It's been known for a while. Barry felt that these people are coming over here mining copper, to mix with tin and bronze.
That's what I was getting at. I didn't know if there was any copper mines in them areas, and that,
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I was talking to Joe.
New Hampshire.
Right, I know. I got to check that out. I know silver. One of the Indian chiefs in this year, actually, a couple of them had Passaconaway lived for 120 years. I think he's very famous in New England, Passaconaway. 120 years, a very tall Indian chief, and he might have kept his hides in our site. But he also had a silver mine in the area. And now, sometimes they say copper, silver, and gold are found close together. I don't know if that's always true, but at least silver, I think, has been found up in Maine, northern Maine, and also in this area, I guess. But I don't know the quantity. I don't know if I could get rich on it. But supposedly there are a couple of silver mines, too, in New Hampshire.
Dennis, you've been talking about the different cultures that came to in North America. I've done a little bit of reading about this idea of the Welsh were in America Rick Osmond discussed it. Have you encountered examples of Native Americans learning the Welsh language from visitors?
I've heard of those legends. I became a guide at our museum back in 1970, and the visitors coming, all the visitors over the years have talked about some of these legends and just reading about them and then seeing them on TV, and then becoming somewhat familiar with like the legends of Prince Madoc of Wales, and when his father, the king, died in 1170, I guess there were 13 legitimate children, and he had more, I guess, other children too, but they began fighting over the throne. So I think Prince Madoc, in a fleet, and one of his brothers decided to head west across the ocean. And so the legend goes he came into the Americas, brought about 100 people, and then he may have gone back over to Wales and brought back more people, and then he disappears into history. You never see him again. And then on this side of the ocean, there's tales of blue-eyed Native Americans. Some had lighter-colored hair. Some had, light skin, that kind of thing. And reports of them speaking what sounds like Welsh, or at least Welsh words, And I think in the 1960s they set up a plaque to Prince Madoc down in Mobile Bay, Alabama, and the plaque isn't there right now. It's in storage, I guess. They're trying to put it back up, I guess, in his honor. And they think he might have touched, land at that point and then gone up the river. And then there's these forts found in the heartland of America too. There's many of them, I guess, of these hill forts. And Chattanooga, Tennessee, some people speculate he was in that area. And there's that famous in Kentucky, we had a battle there, and I think that was the Falls of Ohio, I think. A very famous battle that took place.
Yeah, the Battle of the Falls of the Ohio by Louisville.
Yeah. By Louisville, exactly. That's quite famous, yeah. And then Lewis and Clark get into the looking at the Northwest, for the Northwest Passage, and also doing a kind of a land survey of the Louisiana Purchase. But one of the missions was, I guess, by Thomas Jefferson, to see if any of these Welsh Indians were out there. And I don't think that they actually came in contact with them, but a guy named George Gatling, some years later, actually did. And he spent time living with the Mandans and described their the Welsh words, what the people look like, and also how they practice parts of the Old Testament, I guess, with Moses coming off the mountain and everything. So it's one of those legends. It's kind of interesting, I don't know how true it is, but it sounds pretty neat. But it seems to be a lot of this, and then this Sir, St. Brendan the Navigator, we talked about him a little bit earlier, and then Sir Henry Sinclair, another one of these early legends too, coming to the Americas, with little bits of evidence possibly, that they actually were here. And but yeah, the Welsh is interesting because we have the ancient Celtic markings, and that would have been, an earlier time period,
Well, I find this stuff all fascinating. I want to let the listener know a little bit about you. You grew up going to this place constantly, didn't you?
Yeah, I grew up with the place pretty much. Yeah, I was just a baby when my dad got involved with it, and I spent many years up there guiding, starting around 1970. The years before that, I put bumper stickers on cars, and I was up there listening to the guides give tours to our visitors. Well, we opened up in 1958, but my dad first got involved with it in 1955 when I was about a year old. So it's been part of my whole life, and now my son's involved with it, which is kind of nice.
Here I'm talking with the mute on.
Yeah.
I do it at least once a show, and so does Mark.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times already tonight. Yeah, Dennis, in one of the excavations, did you say that some crystal was found?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do have two wells. There are actually stone wells on the site. One's called the upper well, and the other one's called the lower well. And my dad, back in the 1960s, decided to clean out the upper well. Nobody had done that before, and we weren't sure how deep it went and what was at the bottom of it. So he, in '63, he and some of the other, researchers got up there and they went down into the well, and bucket by bucket, they cleaned the whole thing out and went down several feet. And what they found is the well's lined with stones, stacked stones. And when you get down to the bottom, it's all been quarried bedrock. It goes right into the bedrock. And what he found down there was all these quartz crystals. And what it looks like today is it could be a mine shaft used to take these quartz, and then what they were doing is taking the quartz out of a vein, I guess, in the bedrock. I'm not a geologist, but that's what it appears to be. And these quartz crystals, some of these are on display in our museum today. And because we know they were used for worshiping, they're very, very, very hard stones, so you might be able to inscribe something like the deer carving or something like that with them. But a lot of these ancient religious sites, you find these quartz. Sometimes on tops of these piles of rock called cairns, you find these quartz on top too also. So it might have been a mine shaft. And that was kind of an interesting discovery by them. And the wall between the well and what we call the courtyard area is only about a foot thick. So if that well ever fills up with water, it will flood out that whole area. There's no spring of water in that well. It's just a vein of quartz in the bedrock. The only time you get water in there is from rain or when the snow melts. So it's not really a well for water. So that's one of the puzzles. Like, why would they do that? Why would they spend their time doing that? It looks like it might have been a mine shaft, actually. It goes down about 22 feet.
Yeah, the quartz was also included in the around the entrance to Newgrange. Is that some kind of connection?
Oh yeah, the outside wall of Newgrange has a beautiful quartz. I visited that. Yeah, it's pretty. You've been there, Mark, right? It's impressive, yeah. Very impressive. Yeah. And I think that's true. A lot of the ancient sites, quartz seems to be found with these sites. Some people think that you put energy into quartz, it bends. If you bend quartz, energy comes out of the piezoelectric effect, Or if you have the earthquakes and you have quartz, it'll give off a glow. I don't know. I think it's a blue glow or something like that. So, ancient people might have they worshipped this, this quartz. But Newgrange has the quartz in the face of it. The facade is beautiful, And quartz was found at our site, so whoever it was interested in quartz too. Maybe they used it as part of one of the ceremonies up there too, having quartz there, some sort of energy or something like that. But so they were taking it out of this hole, the well, the upper well. The lower well has never been dug. That's another place we have to get in there someday and dig that. We don't know how far it goes down or what type of artifacts you'll find, because every time it went down about 18 to 19 feet, the thing flooded. So it's almost like the Oak Island, what do you call it, the money pit. Every time they go down there, they tried it several times and it kept flooding. So we stopped right there, and it went down about 18 feet, and that was it. So it goes down several feet below that. We just don't know how far it goes down.
Wow, I find that interesting.
That well's right in the middle of the double wall path. It's like a sacred way that goes from the watch house up to the main site. And some people think maybe it was a well, or like a holy, for holy water or something. But it's right in the middle of the pathway, and the wall runs several hundred feet from the watch house. It goes right up to the main site. On the other side of the site, where we think the entrance to the site was, there's another double wall path, and it continues out to the northwest. And I remember being over in England, what do they call it? The West Kennet Avenue is a walled, like a sacred way between, I'm trying to think of the two sites, Avebury, I think it was. Haven't been over there for about 20 years now, but it's a very, very long pathway, these rocks on either side, tall stones and short stones.
Avebury, I think it's.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I think it was considered a sacred way.
Winter solstice to summer solstice or something. One of them.
Yeah, the avenue goes to what a little hill that used to be called the Sanctuary.
Oh, the Sanctuary, that's right. Yes, Sanctuary. Yeah, that's correct. It connects that, and it goes to that. And then I think another part of it goes off to another, which is now missing. If you look down from like an airplane, you would look at a big serpent, the wall, the walls, and it goes up to the Sanctuary, the walls, and it goes to Avery. And then another part, it looks like a big snake or some sort of a serpent, I think, the shape of it from the air. It's kind of neat looking. But the apiary has the bank and ditch, and it's I think about 1,200 feet across. I was reading recently where that same exact diameter is for the Great Circle at Newark, Ohio. The same bank and ditch, the same exact diameter. So that's kind of neat too. And we know they use megalithic yards, rods, and inches over in Europe, European sites. Our site seems to have that also. And I don't know about the Great Circle, if that's based on a megalithic measurement, but it's either coincidence, but it's the same as a bank and ditch in England, the same exact diameter.
I find that real interesting.
Is that megalithic yard?
Mark, before you get another question going, we got 1 minute for break. And
okay, I'll make it more of a yes or no. Is the megalithic yard concept you're talking about based on Alexander Thom's book?
Yes, I think Alexander Thom's the one that, he's the one that I guess you'd say discovered the megalithic inch, the megalithic yard, and the megalithic rod. Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So
that's interesting.
So it's...
I just wanted to go ahead and remind everybody his site is StonehengeUSA.com. That's StonehengeUSA.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for hour 2 of An Open Canvas. I just want to remind you.
That should say and Mark Eddy, but it don't.
We'll get to that at some point. I'll have to talk to Lorian about re-recording that. But we're listener supported, and we appreciate a donation or two if you can afford it to help keep the lights on and keep great guests coming to the show like we have tonight with Dennis Stone. And if anyone has some questions, you can call in at area code 347-688-2902 or contact Thomas on Skype.
A Mad Painter on Skype. A
Mad Painter is his name. And, just keep the discussion going. We have a lot of interesting topics going, and, we'd be glad to cover anything else that you want to know about ancient America. Dennis knows a little bit about everything. So, all right, Thomas.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Mitchell Hedges skull. I was told you had it there for a while.
Yeah, back in the early 90s. One day, a lady showed up with a couple other people, and I don't think we had any knowledge you were going to show up that day, and I was there, unfortunately. And it turns out I was Anna Mitchell Hedges, and with, I think, a couple of her family members, and she brings this box in, and I don't know if I was aware of the skulls the crystal skulls at that time, and she brings us in. She tells us a little bit about herself and her family history, and like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then she opens this box up that protected it, and there it was, a beautiful skull with a moving jaw. And I was like, holy cow, it was really beautiful. But she was up there for the day, and she gave us, a little more information about her dad and everything, and that was pretty fascinating. He was like the original Indiana Jones, and she took a tour of our site, and then she set the crystal skull on the table, and we took photographs, and she and it seemed to have moved on the table, and I got some people's interest. I don't, kind of moved a little bit, but it was on kind of a little swivel thing anyway. But the crystal skull was pretty cool, and I guess there's about 13 of them in the world. And one of them, I believe, is in the British Museum, which I visited, but I don't recall seeing it over there. But some people think that these crystal skulls came from Atlantis. Some people suggest it came from outer space, and some other people suggest they're all made in the 1800s, I guess, because they've been around for a long time. But she was really interesting, and it was in her care, and she found it in Belize back, I believe, I'm trying to think of the date now when she found it. It was, it must have been 80 or 90 years ago. And I was just happening to watch Indiana Jones the other day, the latest one that came out, and they're talking about her on that movie, and they were showing the skull, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that skull's something else. I've talked to a couple people who's actually got to handle it and stuff, and interact with it. It's something else. They actually took it to Bell Laboratories and done some tests on that particular skull. Come out with some.
She said that, yeah. They thought it was amazing that somebody with a primitive technology could make something like that. And I think Hewlett Packard also did a study on it too. She
yeah,
a couple
Hewlett Packard. I'm sorry, not Bell. Yeah. It was Hewlett Packard.
My dad worked for Bell Laboratories. Yeah, that was kind of, he worked there. But yeah, that is neat. They weren't sure how somebody could do it at that time period, and then I guess there's 12 more, and they're all a little bit different.
They only found one imperfection in it, from my understanding, but I'm not positive. I mean, I'm old and my memory don't work real good.
It sounds about that. Yeah, I know. Mine's getting it too. I think that's about my crystal skull. My head isn't working too good, but yeah, I think they said it was almost perfect. Yeah, just a slight imperfection, and it seemed to have given out like glow, I guess. So somebody had it in their house or something, gave out like a glow, or it was lit up the room, but.
Crystal can hold energy, like you said earlier,
Oh yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, so she was real interesting, and then she had some of her books she wrote. She actually wrote a book on it. It was like with a red cover on it, and we bought some from her there, and then we got more shipped to us. And I think she was living in Canada. She's probably passed away since then. I'm not sure where that crystal skull actually is today now, but
I believe she has passed away.
Has she?
I believe she has.
She has, yeah. So we saw her probably about a little over 20 years ago, and she was getting on her knees at that time. She was doing pretty good, but and her dad, I guess, rode with Poncho Vere and all sorts of really cool stuff. She was telling us a little bit about him and everything. So yeah, the crystal skull was pretty neat.
Mark,
I don't know what
Joshua Shapiro actually have contact with it.
I think he said that, and he's been around almost every known one.
Yeah, he's one of the most famous experts here in the United States for crystal skulls. On your site, has any kind of jewelry or anything been found?
Let's see. We found both historic and prehistoric. Prehistoric, we've had hammerstones, rubbing stones, scrapers, stone hoes, different types of utensils, weapons. We've had arrowheads, stone knives. And when Mr. Goodwin was here during the 1930s, he found what appears to be a bronze dagger. And it's in his book, and the book was written in 1946. It was called The Ruins of Great Ireland and New England. And there's a picture of it. He lived in Connecticut, in Hartford, and some of the artifacts he took from our site, we have photographs, we just don't have the artifacts anymore. He found hundreds of artifacts when he hired a crew to dig the site, and some of these are missing today. Some of the, like stone hole, we still have, and some of the other nice artifacts we have, but there's a lot that's missing. And that what he thought was a bronze dagger, if we had that today, we could send it out to a laboratory and they could do some sort of analysis on it, and we could have an archaeologist check it out to see.
It's probably in the hands of a private collector somewhere, huh?
It could be, yeah. It ended up down there, and maybe exactly, or somebody's basement just collecting dust.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should own artifacts myself.
Yeah, it's a shame. We don't know where we thought some of it. She was the curator of the early American antique collection at the Wadsworth Antiquarium in Hartford, Connecticut. Maybe some of it ended up there. His first cousin was J.T. Morgan, and together they put that collection together, and it's still there today. I guess it's still quite a nice collection, but did some of these artifacts from our site get stuck in somebody's basement or a museum cellar? But that would be a really neat one to find. You find a couple other bronze things too, but we just don't.
They got no clue of what they even have most of the time, you know.
Oh, right, exactly, yeah. I'm sure there's some places.
We have a question from the chat room, and she come in late, but she wanted, and she's one of our hosts here at the station, so I'm going to ask it anyways. Is this American Stonehenge near any Indian mounds?
The closest mounds might be in Ossipee, New Hampshire, I'd say that's probably about 80 miles up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. There may be some a little bit closer, but not right near our site. The only thing I can be aware of is the Turtle Mound in Andover, and that's several miles true south of our site. The other ones would be up in Ossipee, and they have a golf course built over it, and there's some question as to whether these are natural mounds or Native American mounds. There are some shell mounds that were found along the coast in Maine and New Hampshire. The Piscataqua River, I can never pronounce it, has some Native American mounds too, but that would be about 30 miles from our site. So right against our site, no, but a few miles away is a Turtle Mound, and then there's some others up on the New Hampshire-Maine border, and then further up into the White Mountains in New Hampshire. That I'm aware of, anyway.
The ones on the golf course, I think, that's sad.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like Newark, isn't it? Newark, Ohio, mounds with a golf course built over it. And that's one of the biggest earthworks in the world right there, and they got a golf course. And then they had like a 65-mile road that goes to Chillicothe, which is more of those mounds. But it's a shame with Ohio so big that they had to pick that spot to put a golf course with all the land around there, It's kind of sad. I know the golf course has done its best to preserve it now, but it's too bad they didn't build it down the road a couple miles, maybe.
Yeah, Dennis, speaking of other nearby sites, the Westford Knight is, a relatively short distance from you. Could you describe that? There's a lot in our area. There's many sites, and the Westford Knight definitely is very interesting. It's got a lot of attention. And in fact, there's a new movie coming out and by David Brody, and the book is called The Cabal of the Westford Knight. That book came out 4 years ago. The movie is yet to be released. They're working on it now. It's a 2-hour movie. But that carving was found. I'm not sure the time it was found, but in the 1950s, people were already aware of this. And a gentleman, Frank Glenn, president of the Connecticut Archaeological Society, and a good friend of my dad's later in time, who worked on our site and other sites in New England, he looked at that with his daughter, and I don't think it really interested him too much. You could see some markings on the bedrock, but he didn't think too much of it. But his daughter was more curious, and she started removing some of the debris that was on it. And as it got more exposed, I guess he took more of an interest. And he was in correspondence with a gentleman named T.L. Lethbridge, a famous archaeologist from England. And he eventually sent them, I think, pictures and a description of the whole thing and maybe a tracing of it. And he thought, and T.L. Lethbridge thought it was looked like a knight, like a medieval knight. And eventually they were able to look at what looks like the crest. It's kind of, the sword is very, very clear, but the rest of it's very, very weathered. Some of it's glacial markings that they incorporated into this carving, so that's natural. But they used a hammer and a pick on it to make this actual carving. So it's all these little dimples in the rock that make the whole outline of this knight.
Wasn't it more visible back in the 1800s or something?
That's a great question, yeah. And it's right next to a road. And unfortunately, all the salt and all the debris from, people driving by go on top of this stone, salt and, all the slush and everything, and just weathering, it's exposed to the elements, is weathered it away. I think in the 50s it was even more clear than it is today. The BBC did a documentary on that, and they put dyes on it to try to bring out the pick marks, better. and it did show it. I guess this person was an expert in this, trying to bring out for very faint carvings by putting dyes. You can actually show it. It will enhance the carving. And they did that probably about, I don't know, 10 to 15 years ago, the BBC did. And the pictures do show it up a little bit better. In our museum, we have a full-size fiberglass, not plaster, but fiberglass cast of this, the whole, this night carving. And it's pretty neat. But the idea is that they think that Sir Henry Sinclair in 1398 came to the Americas and landed up in Guysborough, Nova Scotia first, and then somewhere down by, some people suggest he was down by the Money Pit, Oak Island, and they wonder if he's tied into that. And New Ross Island, I think they call it. New Ross, it's called the town of New Ross in Nova Scotia. And it actually looks like the outlines of a structure. It could be something they thought might be where he lived for a while. And then he made it into the Merrimack River, which is kind of on the New Hampshire-Massachusetts border, and went west. And where it bends and goes up towards New Hampshire towards the White Mountains, he went west further into the town of Westford, Massachusetts. And he and his group were there, and one of his guys, his name was Sir James Gunn, and he was a relative of Sir Henry Sinclair. And they think he died, and his carving, the sword is broken. In the carving, it's actually broken, and that would mean like a knight had fallen. The crest has been identified as a Gunn family crest, and it has rosary beads. It has the bird that's spitting, and I'm trying to think. It has a couple other little features on it.
What
besides the whole night carving? It's pretty neat.
What time period are we talking for that family?
Yeah, it's post-Viking, and Sir Henry Sinclair's family had Viking blood in them. They had Scottish and French blood in them. And this would be about 1398, 100 years prior to Christopher Columbus. But Sir Henry Sinclair's granddaughter, according to the history I've read, and I've seen this in several different books, Christopher Columbus' wife, Philippa Mons Perestrola, I think I never pronounced the word right, but she was the granddaughter of Sir Henry Sinclair. So there's a tie into the Columbus and the Sinclairs, which
right.
I think more people do a little bit more checking on that. But if that's true, that's interesting because
I know who they were, but I wanted to make sure the audience know who they were. We've been joined by 708. Do you have a question for our guest?
Yes. I actually thought that there was over 150 years from Columbus.
Oh, from the St. Clairs to Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to have made the voyage in 1398 according to the legends and the stories. So that would have been about, and then 1492. So there's a little bit, it was almost 100 years, just about 100 years. And, but Columbus did spend time in Bristol, England. He went to Galway, where St. Brendan the Navigator near the Dingle Peninsula had taken off. And Columbus actually, they believe, went to Iceland. And that's where the Viking descendants are still today. I think if his wife was grandfather was Sir Henry Sinclair, the family knew of these voyages to the west, to this land we call America today. So, and her father, Columbus's father-in-law, was a map maker. And so I think he had access to this information, and he may have been up there trying to get more information from the descendants of the Vikings, or the Icelandic people. But it's about 100 years.
All right, nice to know.
Do you have another question?
Well, yeah, I know it's kind of off a topic, but do you guys talk about Comet Izon at all?
Not on this show. We're talking about ancient history. But other shows do talk about it. Comet Izon don't exist no more. It come around the sun and dissipated. We were going to travel. We were supposed to go through it the 15th, the tail. But other than that, sorry.
All right, that's fine.
it's kind of cool. Some of the ancient carvings do seem to indicate ancient, comets and stuff like that, or supernovas exploding and stuff like that. Some of the ancient people actually did that in some of the paintings or carvings. It's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Dennis, you also have an interesting artifact in your museum that came from Sir Edmund Hillary. Could you tell us about that? I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah, my dad had this thing hanging in his wall in his home one day. I went over there back in the 90s. It was like a plaster thing. I said, well, what the devil is that thing hanging up there? He goes, it's Yeti. It's Bigfoot. I said, well, where the heck did you get that thing from? And he goes, well, I got that from Charlie Hapgood. And Charlie Hapgood, he's passed away. I think he died, he died probably around, when was it, 1988, I think it was. But he was a good friend of my dad, and he was a researcher. He was a professor at the college, and he wrote books, and Einstein actually endorsed one of his books. One of the only times Einstein ever did that. But it belonged to his collection. So before he died, he called my dad, and he gave my dad a number of things, which was kind of neat. It's almost like he knew he was going to go, and he gave my dad that cast. And the story behind that, I guess it came from Charlie Hapgood. He got it from, I'm trying to think if he got it from Sir Edmund Hillary. But that Sir Edmund Hillary, about 10 years after he climbed Mount Everest, he and Marlin Perkins from the Wild Animal Kingdom got together, and they went up back to the Himalayas, and I think they were out searching for the Bigfoot. And I think they were both kind of skeptical about the thing existing, but they went anyway to see if they could find any evidence of it. And this is the thing they brought back. And then it ended up in Charlie Hapgood's collection, and then my dad has it. And so that's kind of neat, And I don't know if it represents a Yeti or not. It looks like the typical Yeti footprint you see on TV or in books when you look at them, the pictures of them. It's pretty big. And so I don't know if they ever thought it really was or not, but it came from, Sir Edmund Hillary. I think he just died a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. I find this stuff interesting. What's your opinion on Bigfoot?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I think that is interesting. Hopefully they can find, if it does exist, they can find something that they can actually, identify. They're doing DNA samples on hair and everything now, and I guess there's some interesting results. But
has there been any sighted up there by you?
I don't know in New England. I know in the Northwest they have them in the heartland of the United States, and they have them in the Southeast, and they call them different things. But I'm not sure. Native American legends out west talk about these animals, these gigantic, I guess people or whatever these things are. Native American legends talk, and I think that's where some of the names Sasquatch and Yeti come from, because they're in the Himalayas. But in New England, I'm not too familiar with anything. There may have been some sightings or something like that. We had a book called Weird New England, and they talk about people have seen this very unusual thing with glowing eyes, but I don't think that was considered a Yeti. Something like the Mothman.
The reason I asked is because they've been reported around the Snake Mound, and
they have been. Oh,
yeah, and the Turtle Mound.
Oh,
I was kind of maybe
interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody having video cameras or on the phones now. You think, I think that could be. It could be, but you think someone's going to capture it, and they'll be able to show positively that this thing's real, not just some hoax that somebody did. But I find it fascinating anyway. And that UFOs, I think that's pretty neat too. We met Betty Hill and all of that.
Now, growing up here, have you ever had any spiritual enlightenment? I'm not sure how to put it. I don't want to make it sound like a zap and you're there. That ain't what I meant. But do you feel anything spiritual?
I feel there's an ancientness to the site, but there are a lot of our visitors that go up there. They say they feel something, and maybe more people are tuned to it or a little bit more sensitive to it. I'm kind of open-minded to it, and we do every fall we have people up there doing a ghost hunt, and they do like about a 45-minute briefing in that theater, and they show all the equipment, they explain what they're doing, and they're pretty serious about it, and they show some of the things they found in the past at our site and other places. And then they take the people up there for about, probably 2 to 3 hours, and groups of maybe 20 to 30 people. And then they come back, and then they do like a post ghost hunt briefing too, and they show what people have seen, the sounds, the sights, the photographs, the whatever video they take. And some people say they really do feel things up there, on the site. We've had one of the guys that writes for Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures. He just did a show up there and it was under a different title, New England Legends. And he had actually one of the 3 hosts up there, Nick, and talking about the site and the feeling of ancient people being there and that kind of thing. But myself, I think that'd be kind of neat. I'd like to have a time machine actually and go back in time and see what the place looked like, what the landscape looked like, who the people were.
Some kind of remote viewing or something.
You know what? We think the Phoenicians may have been one of the, Phoenician Libyan Celts were in Spain and Portugal. It was a melting pot, according to Barry Fell, where these cultures came together. So they would have been multilingual. They would, they would exchange all sorts of cultural things. And then if they made their voyage across the ocean, you'd expect to find same things over here, Libyan, Celtic, Phoenician. And at the mouth of the Merrimack River, which we talked about, it had, I guess about 3 years ago, they were doing building a house, and down several feet in the ground, they had to help how it was down. I forget what the depth was. They found a coin that was Phoenician. And it's right at the mouth of the Merrimack, right where the people would have come in if they're going by ocean, up the Merrimack, and then they would have been very within 4 miles of our site. And there's a river called the Stickett River that goes from the Merrimack right to the base of our hill, and that's where that glacial cliff shelter where the Native Americans live, they'd be looking down into the Stickett River. And on the east side, that's on the west side of our site. On the east side is swamps and rivers, and that we think at one time that might have been and it's one of the ways they could have accessed our site too. It would have been a little bit closer, a little bit shorter, and today it's silted in, and there's still brooks there and swamps and ponds, but that's where we need a geologist. But so right at the mouth of the Merrimack was where a Phoenician coin was, and that was found about 3 years ago, right after my dad died. And just before that, they found a coin that was Carthaginian, because that's one of the Phoenician cities. And the coin has on Scott Show, on Scott Show, they show it. It's a little map on this. You have to almost use a magnifying glass. It's right in your face, but it's a map of looks like Africa, the Mediterranean, and part of Western Europe. And on the left side of it, it looks like Florida, the Gulf Coast, and the Eastern Seaboard. And that was found just before that other coin was found. So my dad was still alive.
It looks like I'm going to have to break down and watch some television.
It's pretty good. Yeah, that's a pretty,
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's these things are being found. I mean, in Mass they found Roman coins because they found them on the Ohio River. They found them on the Kentucky, Tennessee River. They found Roman coins all the way down into Brazil. And the amphimori, those great big clay vessels, have been found in Castine, Maine. They've been found along the eastern seaboard of the United States and found in Rio de Janeiro in the big harbor. They found more of these Roman, they held wine or water or olive oil or whatever, but these have been found there. These things they think that the Third Carthaginian War, probably when Rome conquered Carthage, which was a Phoenician city, they were able to obtain enough information to find out where these Phoenicians had got all these goods. It was like a trade monopoly. They kept it very quiet. It was a secret. So I think they were able to break that. Where the fault of secrecy, they were able to break it and find out where the Phoenicians had gone.
Dennis, when you were just talking about the water levels thousands of years ago, were the people able to bring their boats much closer to where America's Stonehenge is now, or did they have a farther walk?
Yeah, it's about 4 miles now to the bend in the Merrimack River, but I think that area was probably accessible by boat. And because of the ice age, we go back to the ice age with the last glacial maximum when the oceans were about 400 feet lower, and it was about a mile of ice covering a lot of the land. Some of it's a half a mile, a mile. In our area, it's probably close to a mile. And it had pushed that ground down where I'm at right now, between a quarter and a half a mile. And as the ice melted, the oceans warm, the water expands and rises, and you're adding more water to it. So the water goes up about 400 feet eventually. It took time. But the land also rebounded, and as it came up, the water would, the ocean level, it was like a back and forth kind of thing, And we've done a lot of maps along the coast. And the coast was as close as 10 miles to us. Today it's about 18 miles away. It might have been a little bit, about 10 miles away. And it was about 18 miles away today. So the coast is actually closer, but you have to go back thousands of years ago. I mean, right after the glacial period, around 10 or 12. But even closer to us, the land has changed its level, and also things have silted in with dirt. So we're pretty sure that, yes, you could have gone very close to our site. If you look at all the topographical maps, and we talked to some geologists, the eastern side of our hill probably is where they would have sailed up to. The west side has a spigot, but the spigot is more like land, the greater land steeper. It has some falls, and it has a couple of modern dams on it. But the other side would have been probably the way they would have come up. They would have gone up to Haverhill, Massachusetts, where the Big Bend is, and then they would have followed that path, I think, to our site. But it's only about a 4-mile walk today to the river.
Okay. Now, were any of the red ochre people found at your site or in the vicinity? Can we date any burials near Mystery Hill?
That's a great question. In the back of my mind, I remember they have found some red ochre on us at that iron oxide with the clay, I guess. They have found some of that in some of the archaeological digs. I think in the 60s they identified some of this red ochre. We didn't actually find the bones. The bones were dissolved in the, in this New England soil is very acidic in 100 years to a couple hundred years. So it doesn't last too long, but with modern technology, they can analyze the soil for chemical traces, I guess, like potassium and calcium, different things. And unfortunately, Mr. Goodwin cleaned out the structure so clean that the original material is not in it. If he had not done that, we could take it out today and analyze the soil and say, yeah, it looks like it was a burial. The east-west chamber we have looks like a galley grave you find in Europe. They're in Holland, Ireland, and in France. They're about 20 to 60 feet in length, and they always run out of true north, east, and west. They're called galley graves. Our D-hut looks like the wedge tombs of Ireland, and every wedge tomb in Ireland that my dad saw back about 30 years ago, we spent a week over there, they always face southwest, and our chamber is the only structure on the site that faces southwest. And there's a couple other chambers on the site, too, that have very strong resemblance, but it's the size, shape, and orientation that makes it so similar to the European megalithic sites. And those were probably tombs, and that's what they were over in Europe. The wedge tombs were used as tombs, the galley graves were used as tombs, and I think our chambers were used for that. And when Goodwin first photographs it, those things are full of dirt, and the dirt's not there today, which is really a shame. They may have had the evidence that they were burial chambers.
Has there been any giants reported up in that area?
Giants, not that I'm aware of. In New York, that's the closest I'm aware of people like skeletal remains that are very tall.
Mm-hmm.
I think in New York State, and I don't know of anything any closer, like in Vermont and New Hampshire. They may have found, but that's the closest I think in Ohio, and as you were mentioning earlier, all across the country and everything. But the closest I think was in New York. It's not the Caddick giant that was a hoax or thing, but real skeletal bones that are very, very big, or skulls. I think New York State is the closest that I'm aware of right now. The soil up here eats up bones very quickly. It's a very short time that they dissolve. Which is unfortunate.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, Dennis. Since you have so many places near, places of interest so close to American Stonehenge, have you ever thought about taking tours out to all these places, and visitors can just have a one-stop, just go to your place, park there for the day, go out on different excursions?
Well, yeah, that's a great idea. Our road out here, the main road that goes east and west, is called Route 111, and there's a number of structures right along that. It runs from the seacoast in New Hampshire, it heads west, goes past our site, and it goes right out towards where the Westford Knight is. It doesn't go exactly right to the Westford Knight, but it goes within a couple of miles of there. And I thought of something like to do the Route 111 tour or experience or something like that, the megalithic tour. And I know one of the nearer people thought that might be a good idea if we could just get the thing together sometime. And I know I've talked to you, and you've mentioned some other places that have done this over in Europe. And also there was a gentleman in the States doing it, I think in Ohio, I think we were talking about. So I think it'd be a great idea. If we have enough interest, it might be either just a convoy of cars, which Neary has done in the past. They've taken these day trips, the field trips, that kind of thing. But actually offer that, something like that for tourists to actually do. And it'd be our site. And the sites in the next town over, there's 2 chambers like ours. The next one over has a couple chambers like ours. And even a stone circle over in Raymond, New Hampshire. Some of these are on private property, so we'd have to, some are on state, some are on town property. You certainly would have to kind of get permission from, I guess, all of these, to make sure, and it's a liability issue too,
Yeah, it might be a worthwhile endeavor, though.
I think so, yeah. There's lots of them. Yeah.
You want to tell everybody where you're located, and there is accommodations nearby, isn't there?
Yeah, Salem's a pretty good sized town, and we're now only 40 miles north of Boston, and there's hotels between here and Boston. Salem has a number of really nice hotels right off the main highway, Route 93. That's the one that comes out of Boston and goes up to the White Mountains. And we're located 40 miles north of Boston, and and if you fly into Logan in Boston, it's an easy commute, or Manchester, New Hampshire has a big airport, and people often come into there, and we're only about 20 minutes away from Manchester Airport, and we're about 18 miles from the coast. And we're open every day, like we were saying, except for 2 days of the year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so any time of the year you can visit us. I think the fall is the prettiest time to come up here with the foliage. It's really nice, no mosquitoes. But if we have our website. If you have any questions, or you want to give us a call, our telephone number's on that also.
Which is American Stonehenge, USA.com. I had to remember.
Yeah, StonehengeUSA.com. Yep, and then we have an email address there too. Yeah.
Y'all got some alpacas up there, right?
We do. Yeah, we've had them for a number of years,
I think that's pretty cool.
So much. They look like they came from the Star Wars movie, I think, but they're really fun, and we've had them. My son was young when we first got them, and we got a few babies up there, and but it's so neat because it's part of the history of the United States. So there's so much we don't know about our own country. I think we have to travel overseas or South America, and they have some beautiful things there, but the United States really has a lot. But the alpacas are part of the llama family, which is part of the camel family. And when we got them, we became educated. We learned a little bit. And these camels are all North American animals. They were here for 45 million years in North America, from Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Circle. And today they find camel bones and llama bones. And the most recent was found in a Walmart parking lot in Mesa, Arizona. It's called a Walmart camel. And it was a middle-aged camel, I think, or a young... and a baby camel, and they dated it to 8,000 years old. They didn't know they lived that long in North America. They thought they became extinct 10 to 12,000. And that's around almost the time of our earliest carbon dating on the hill. So somebody was walking around out there, these animals are just becoming extinct for some reason. And they're not really sure why, but they died out. And then we have some of the biggest pyramids in the world.
Someone in our chat room earlier, when we were talking about ancient ancestors, they said they found... a Neanderthal man in his local Walmart.
Oh, they did. The missing link, maybe, or something like that. Yeah. But that's kind of neat. And then we have a lot of school groups, so we always ask where the camels came from, and they say Egypt, and then they're surprised, like the teachers are and the chaperones, with the United States, part of Canada, and Mexico is their, their ancestral home. And you ask where the nearest pyramids are, it's always Egypt, pretty much. And it's like, well, maybe Mexico's a little closer, or South America. The United States has some of the biggest pyramids in the world right now, heartland of the United States. The mound builders are huge,
People think you have to go overseas to find all this ancient stuff,
yeah.
And it's right here in our backyard. We just don't know about it.
You have so much history and prehistory, and you're right. You just don't know about it. And I mean, when I went to school, I wasn't taught that. I don't think the teachers were aware of that. You never heard it mentioned, either in any high school or college at all. You've never heard of this stuff. So it's really amazing. The United States has so much, and we just don't. We're all ignorant of it, I guess. If it wasn't for a museum, I wouldn't know about it either. I wouldn't know about these places.
Dennis, do you sell any of the alpaca shearing after? You clip them. If someone wants to make a sweater.
Yeah, we share them. We have a guy come up from Rhode Island. I guess probably not too far from that Newport, the Newport Tower down there, but he's from that area, and he comes up once a year and shares them, and we make it into yarn, the little skeins of yarns. We have it sent out to actually a place in Connecticut does it has a mill there, and it's really warm. It's 3 times warmer than like sheep's wool on the average. It doesn't itch you. It's very nice. Even against your skin, it does not itch you. It doesn't have that lanolin. But they say that they were bred by the people in South America, and by the time the Inca came along, they reserved their fiber for the royalty. So only the Inca royalty would wear fiber from the alpaca and vicuna, and it was very precious, very expensive. So there's a lot of history to that too. But today we do sell it there, and it makes really nice warm clothes, socks, hats, and all that stuff. People that like to knit, they make some beautiful stuff out of it.
You mentioned the Portsmouth Tower. Do you think there's any connection between it and your place?
Well, I think the Newport Tower may be more of that time period of the medieval time period. Probably some people like David Brody and Scott Walters, I think, thinks it probably in the 1300s. It was built. It was post-Viking, pre-Columbus. Verrazano, the explorer, goes up for King Francis I, comes up the eastern seaboard looking for that northwest passage like so many people did, and goes by Chesapeake Bay, Delaware Bay, right into New York Harbor, right by where the Verrazano Narrows Bridge is today. And then he takes a tour of southern New England and ends up in Narragansett Bay. And I believe his brother was a map maker. I forget his name. It's Giovanni Verrazano's the navigator, but his brother, his name, I forget it. But he was a map maker, and he mapped that area. But when he goes into the harbor, the Native Americans come out to their boat and help guide them into the bay. And the name of the harbor pilot, if you will, the Native American's name was Magnus, kind of a Northern European name. And Verrazano describes him as pretty tall, very fierce, and much fairer than his skin. Some had blue eyes, green eyes, some had light-colored hair. And then Roger Williams of Rhode Island describes the Narragansett in the same way. And I think the map they made shows what looks like a Newport Tower on it. At that time, that would have been 1524 when Verrazano sailed in there. And then Roger Williams would have been later, but he described the same thing that Verrazano did. It almost sounds like a group of Northern Europeans intermarried with the Native Americans and went native in their dress, except some of the European features still showed up on them, And the word Narragansett.
Much the answer to that would be not really.
But
because the
word
age
Narragansett,
difference,
Oh yeah, I don't know. It's but they say the word Narragansett might be North Gang settlement. That's a corruption of that. That's just one of the thoughts of some people.
Yeah, Dennis, I was given a question in my Skype box. Is there like an overhead satellite map that shows America's Stonehenge, and if they're lines that link it directly to any of the mounds you're talking about in the White Mountains or any of the other places that you've mentioned?
Oh, good question. I'm trying to think what we have on that.
Kelsey was doing that on the computer, just for the line directly to Stonehenge. But I just wonder if there's more just a local map that you sell at the store or you're aware of someone doing something with it.
So I think what my son has now. He has it on our. We have a computer at the site with a large screen, and we're making that like a research computer, if you will. We're loading on all sorts of data from old photographs going back to 1920, Goodwin's work all the way through the years, including what my son did with what Kelsey did with those alignments. I don't know if it's on the internet yet where people can access that, but if you just Google Earth, you can go down to our site and you can look at the avenues. But I think we'll do that. I think we'll probably do that so people can have that. The other, the Andover site, the Turtle Mound and some of the other alignments too. Because he found some alignments that, like I mentioned earlier, that go to different places around the world. Actually, there's one that's the equinox sunrise, and that goes over to the Azores, and it goes through the pyramids in the Azores, which is kind of cool. Most people don't know there's pyramids in the Azores, and it goes right over them, But that's a good question. I'll have to ask Kelsey if that's accessible at this time, because we are downloading files upon files into that thing for people to come and use it. I think this will be on the internet.
That would be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I was just looking at the weather map the other day of this day, and you can actually really zoom in and you can see our site just like you can.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
map,
can you see it on Google Earth real good, or?
Yeah, you can see it on Google Earth pretty good, and then you can actually do your own research and see if these lines work. You can check for yourself. I was just looking at a weather map from a local TV station, and I started going down, and I realized it was Google Earth map they were using too, and I could see the whole site. I could see our building. I could see the alpacas where they were at and everything. So even the weather map showed it really pretty good detail,
I'm surprised I didn't think of this the last time you were on.
Yeah.
Are the alpacas high maintenance, or are they just pretty easy to deal with?
Yeah, they're pretty easy to deal with. Yeah, they're pretty clean animals. And their fertilizer is great for like composting and stuff like that. The fiber is really nice, and they're really nice, and they all have personalities. Some are really friendly, and others they'll do what a camel does. They'll spit at you, if they get a little upset, and it's not very pleasant. It's like a green gack that comes out, but they're pretty easy, and they'll live up to 20 or so years. We had one die at about 16 years old. Unfortunately, we lost Eddie. But they'll live maybe 20 to 25 years in captivity, maybe. And we met the lady that we introduced them to, if you will, back to North America. And Erla, she's from Vermont, and we have two of her alpacas that are still living there. Their oldest ones were born in 97. They were born, and they're doing very well. The two white ones are Peruvian. They're pure white, so you can dye the fiber any color. The rest of them are all different colors. We have I think there's 24, about 24 natural colors for alpaca. But the white ones you can dye any color you want. And they're pretty nice animals. They eat hay mostly, leaves. So they clean up the yard pretty good when you have leaves falling. And but they are part of the camel family, so they do all the things that a camel does too, And they'll kick you too. They can kick pretty good too if you get a little upset. When you clip the nails particularly.
They don't bite, do they?
They only have bottom teeth, and you have to file them once in a while. But yeah, they can. They have an upper it's like a kind of an upper bony structure. But their front teeth can kind of get you too, because they kind of stick out like they can get you. But they're not really that kind of an animal unless they get provoked. So if they're doing that, they're mad at you for some reason, But they can run fast. They can make a donkey noise, all sorts of noise. So the Inca raised them, and the different cultures before that had them. And I think they were bred maybe as early as 6,000 years ago in South America. But they were missing from this continent. Their ancestors were for about 8,000 years. They were gone. They came back in 1984.
Dennis, I think the last time you were on, you said that the site was not completed. Is there an explanation for why it was abandoned?
Our site. That's a great question. When Kelsey was out there doing more tree clearing during the summer months when he was out for college, he was up there, and his project was to reopen up a lot of the alignments we started clearing in 1967 to the 1970s. It started filling back in slowly, and you couldn't see him as well. And he was out there, chainsawing and clearing the woods, and he found a couple of great big slabs out there that were raised, just like we found in the 1970s. They were working the bedrock. They were raising up these multi-ton stones, placing the stone under it to hold it up in the air. And then they would take a hammer stone or a throwing stone and start shaping the stone, what we call dressing the stone. It's like Dave Stewart Smith, the gentleman that's going to do the project up the hill with Glee, he calls it actually like making a 10.5 arrowhead, except some of these stones are multiple tons, 7 tons, 6 tons, but it's like making a gigantic arrowhead. That same technology, that same technique. And these are all, we found a whole bunch of them. Dave had known of some of these in the 70s and 80s, and when Kelsey found more of them, what it showed us is that these people were building a much bigger project up there, and they had a bigger intentions for the site, and then something happened. It was never finished, and so it was a work in progress. And then we don't know what happened to it. It makes the mystery even greater. Like, they had more plans for this place. It wasn't like it was all done, and then they slowly lost interest in it. It seems like they're still constructing it, and then something happened, and then they just left the site alone. They abandoned it. So that's kind of a big mystery too, besides who they were, these people.
Have you thought about maybe making a fiberglass replica of the stones and standing them up in the proper place and see what possibly or a computer program?
Well, that's actually. We were thinking of doing it. Actually, we had one that we created out of styrofoam. It was a 14.5 foot stone, and has the same sort of slanted top that you'd see at a site over in Scotland, or in England or Wales or wherever. They seem to have these kind of sloped tops to them, and this one does, and it's located about 100 feet from the North Stone. And a professor from Penn State who got interested and began working on the site in the late 90s, around 97 or 98. He was a professor of archaeoastronomy from Penn State, and he was here from 64 up to the time. I think he passed away. He passed away about 10 years ago, and he just retired. So he was there for quite a while at Penn State. And he was looking at these star alignment stones. And this particular stone, it's fallen, and it's broken in 4 pieces today. And we actually have a styrofoam replica we made just to place it out there to see what it would look like. But according to, the work he did on it, the stone was standing, and it was a circumpolar grazing star. You have like a North Star kind of stays in place, it wiggles a little bit, and then the stars around are called circumpolar. And then the stars that are even further away from the pole star, some of them will actually touch the horizon, and that the other ones will actually rise and set, because the Earth's in the way. But the circumpolar grazing star would actually touch the top of this. And one of the stars he identified that would do this, touch the top of that 14-foot stone, was Isa, a star called Isa. And he thought it was, they looked at these stars as, gods and whatever. But this is also, I guess, a way of identifying or keeping track of time somehow. It's all in his publications and everything, it's an interest. He never finished it, unfortunately. He passed away. He had a heart attack and dropped dead one.
I like the idea of the styrofoam. It would keep the integrity of the site, yet be able to see what it actually looked like.
Exactly, and people can photograph it. And we still have it we have it down now. It's in our museum, but we can put it back up if somebody needs to come and photograph to see what it looked like, And you can imagine the whole hilltop pretty clear of trees, so the stars rising and setting and all of that. Then 4,000 years ago, the star would have been Thuban, would have been different. See, our alignments don't quite work today because of precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year precessional cycle. And also, the Earth's tilt, it wobbles and it's they say a 41,000-year wobble. And so when they fed that into the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, all that data, they said, well, when would these alignments work? And what they came up with in 1977 was that if these were used for astronomical purposes, it would align about 1800 BC, plus or minus about a century or two. And the oldest carbon dating on the main site was 4,000 years old, plus or minus 250 years. So carbon dating and astronomical information seem to corroborate. It's the same time period, about 2000 BC approximately, that the site, we believe, was built and used around that time period.
That's pretty interesting. Mark, you got about time for one more question, brother.
Okay. You had David Hatcher Childress from Ancient Aliens visit your site. What were his thoughts about it?
Yeah, he was here probably about 20 years ago, and he was putting together the Lost Cities collection, South America, North America, and we're in the North American one. And we carried his books for many years, and I think he was really fascinated by the site. He spent a bit of time up there, and then if you read about us in his book, he talks about the site, and then underground tunnels and stuff like that. We do have one area we have to look at. When they ran ground penetration radar to the west of us, like it seemed to indicate a very large hole in the ground, and what it looks like is just the west part of the hilltop looks like it's bedrock covered with a very thin layer of soil. And if you go out there and you jump on that area that they ran the radar over, it does sound hollow. But in any event, David thought there were some underground tunnels that we haven't discovered yet. And maybe he's right or wrong, I don't know. But the cliff area is kind of cool, but it's just a glacial cliff shelter. But he thought it looked something like the megalithic sites he had seen. He travels everywhere, He travels all over the world and everything, and really sees these things more than I even have a chance to do. But he thought our site looked very much like what you'd seen in the European megalithic. And these sites are not only in Europe. They go into Korea. There were 80,000 of them. And they're in Colombia, South America, too. If you Google it, you can see a resemblance between all of these sites, either coincidental or these people were traveling the oceans, which I kind of think people travel a lot more than we give them credit for. But David, he was there. And it's been a while since we've seen him, but he's on TV all the time on the Ancient Aliens now.
Oh, okay, we got about 2 minutes. I want you to go ahead and yell out your websites that you want people to, so they can find you, and anything else you want to get out real quick.
Okay, yeah.
There's the end of it. Go ahead and yell out your website.
Yeah, StonehengeUSA.com. And if they see the movie we're out next year, will be in the movie with David Brody. It's called The American Templars. It should be out. It's a 2-hour movie, and we're in it. We're a big part of it, along with these sites that we talked about in the Northeast tonight. All of these places will be in it.
All right, Al.